Welcome back everyone to the second video of chapter 7. We're now going to take a look at theory B, which is about altitudes. And before I start discussing that, take a good look at what happens when you draw medians and find the centroid. Right, you go through a vertex to the opposing side at the midpoint of that. Je deelt de overstaande zijde mooi door midden en daar gaat die lijn heen. I want you to remember this because an altitude kind of looks like a median, but it has a different rule. And some people confuse the two, and then on the test or in the exercise they start doing the one when they should do the other. So this is how how medians work and how you can find centroids. An altitude has a different rule attached to it. Here we have triangle ABC. And they have drawn the altitudes. How does an altitude work? In Dutch, een hoogtelijn. An altitude still starts in one of the vertices of a triangle for A, B, C, but it doesn't divide the opposing sides in half. Well, sometimes it can if you have a very special triangle, but it's not a rule. It doesn't have to. What it does have to do is that it has to be perpendicular to the opposing side. So for example, here they say in figure 7.11, line through A is perpendicular to side BC, right? And we notate that with this symbol here. The line through B is perpendicular on AC, and the line through C is perpendicular on AB. And therefore, this is how an altitude is described. An altitude of a triangle is a line through a vertex, okay, which is perpendicular to the opposite sides. That's what happens right here. And again, those lines nicely intersect in one point, and that point now is called the orthocenter. In Dutch, again, this is easier because they talk about hoogtelijnen and hoogtepunten. That's why they also denote it with the letter H here, I guess, because that's an abbreviation of hoogtepunt. Unfortunately, we English-speaking mathematicians, we have to talk about altitudes and orthocenters. And altitudes, I think, can be a bit more tricky than medians, because sometimes an altitude can be outside of a triangle, and this happens when we have a so-called obtuse triangle, een stompe driehoek. Because as you can see, if I want to now draw the altitude from point P, it has to be perpendicular on QR. But no matter where I search inside of my triangle, I cannot find a line that's both perpendicular on QR and also goes through point P. So what we have to do here, we have to extend that side, right, in the same direction, and then we can find P, in this case they call it PS, because that's perpendicular on the extension of QR. Same case here. If I want to find the altitude of R, there is no way that I can find that line that's perpendicular on PQ inside of the triangle and goes through R. I have to extend PQ. But not for all altitudes in this case, because the altitude from Q is nicely inside of the triangle, right? Perpendicular on the opposing side, and it goes through point Q. And again, I'm going to show you a GeoGebra example right now, first before we continue. So this was the median and the orthocenter, right? Where the opposite side is nicely divided into two sides. But as you can see, they don't have to be perpendicular at all. For altitudes, they have to be perpendicular, but you now see that they don't divide the opposing side into two equal parts. And I can turn some on and off. So let's say I only take a look at the altitude from A. If I now move this triangle, you see that the altitude also moves, right? Because it's searching for a line that goes through A and is perpendicular on line BC. And you will see that oftentimes that's nicely inside the triangle, but depending on its size, it can also now go outside of the triangle. And that was not the case with medians, right? Medians, I can do what I want, but the medians were always nicely inside of my triangle. Altitudes can occur outside of my triangle, because there's no way that I can find a line perpendicular on BC that goes through A. So that's why we now extend this line, right? Dot it and then find the perpendicular line. And for example, the altitude from B is still nicely inside of my triangle here. The altitude of C is also outside of my triangle. And what can sometimes occur as well is if I don't have an obtuse triangle, but a normal triangle like this, now the altitudes intersect and therefore the orthocenter. I've used the letter O here. They say they normally use H. No, whatever. I've abbreviated orthocenter to O. Here it's nicely inside of my triangle, but in obtuse triangles, it can sometimes occur outside as well. Because if I now search for the intersection point of the altitudes, it goes right here, right? And even if I draw the third one as well, spoiler, we're going to take a look at it in the second grade, that you only have to draw 2 of them and not 3, but okay. If you draw the third one, you see that it goes also through this point. So here the orthocenter is outside of my triangle. This is the intersection point of the 3 altitudes. And if I now change it, you see the orthocenter changes as well. Sometimes you have very weird ones, right? If I make it a very flat triangle, then my orthocenter flies off into the sky. Of course, we won't make it too extreme, because that will mean that you would have to use a lot of drawing paper. But you can, of course, see exercises like this where they ask it in an obtuse triangle. What I want you to remember is the difference between medians and altitudes. And here you have exactly the same triangle, but on the left I've drawn the 3 medians, and on the right I've drawn the 3 altitudes. A median goes through a vertex to the opposing side in such a way that it divides the opposing side in 2 equal sides, right? That's why we use the symbols here to notate that. But they don't have to be perpendicular. This is not perpendicular. This is not perpendicular, right? In altitude, the lines have to be perpendicular, but now they almost never divide the opposing side in 2 equal pieces, right? This from B to this is clearly not the same length as from here to here. Okay, know the difference. That's important. Theory A was about medians, theory B was about altitudes. And with that, I would like to close off this video and this PowerPoint presentation as well. These are important words here. Write them down in your glossary. They will come back to bite you if you don't know what them is. I mean, if you're going to do the test and they say draw the altitudes and you don't know what the altitude is, going to be a difficult test to write. So write them down and know them after you've done the homework and when you're doing the homework yourself, of course, as well. Good luck.